want nobody. Want nobody.
Okay, so after 2.5 months of flight, I think it's safe for me to actually do a critical review of this frame. I quite enjoy it. It's a really durable frame, super tough. I've crashed many times, as I am not the best pilot. But it's just about fun, right? We're all here to have some fun. So you can see up here in the front, I've cracked this top plate a little bit from a nose crash, probably into like a super hard pull or something, I don't remember. The standoffs that Armattan originally sent me were these nylon ones because apparently they didn't have the aluminum ones in stock. So I just ended up just using the nylon ones because I didn't have to use any Loctite or anything and the screws would never pop off. In the back here you can see that I've basically mounted my antenna mount directly to this LED plate that they send you. That LED plate pretty much broke instantly when I got it. I had one hard crash and only one LED would light up green, and that was it. So I said, you know what, I'm just going to desolder all this stuff, and I'm going to mount this antenna mount there because when it was mounted on top of that plate, every time I crashed, the leverage action would just crack that plate like crazy. I ended up mounting the buzzer in this location in the back with some double-sided foam tape and a zip tie. Every time I tried to take the battery off or change the battery, my finger would touch that buzzer and it just was not a good idea. I also ended up soldering on some super thick gauge wire. Well, for these applications, super thick gauge. I've broken way too many antennas to not hard mount these somewhere inside of the frame. I've tried the zip ties, I've tried the straws, and they just break all the time. I've had to cut them down and cut down that shield so many times that I'm done with it. So what I ended up doing was just zip tying these things directly to the frame. Granted, my reception from my transmitter is just terrible, but at least now I'll never break an antenna again. You can see how I've done this. I've just ran it from the receiver along the edge there on the bottom, kind of in a V shape, and zip tied them on there. They're never going to break again. I ended up putting thicker zip ties around these ESCs. You can use heat shrink or electrical tape, whatever fits your fancy. You can see here there's this crack from the antenna from every time I crashed. That leverage would just break that thing like nuts, which is why I ended up mounting it on that bulkhead on the back. DIY bulkhead. Ended up shoving a little piece of bamboo skewer in there just to be sure that that battery lead would never pop off again. Especially in a crash, because when you crash and that battery lead pops off, you don't have a buzzer anymore and you won't be able to find it. Ended up replacing all of my little gauge wires with this thick gauge wire that came with the motors. The reason I did that was because the little gauge wires that I had didn't really work for me. What would happen is the insulation would come back a little bit and the wires would begin to fray, and to me they were getting way too close to making contact with each other. So I didn't like that. And what's nice about these wires are they have that super flexible silicone on the outside and it's not going anywhere. I like how that silicone stays there. My little solder joint stays perfect. It doesn't look like they're ever going to fray and bridge with each other and cause crazy problems. I did that for my buzzer, and I also did that for the NAS32's power input straight from the battery. Alright guys, what can I say? This is a pretty solid frame. If you like 4-inch props and a unibody, maybe you can give this one a try. You're probably not going to break it. When I crash with this thing, it just does a laughable amount of cartwheels and you're good to go. You can just get back up and fly. Let's just do a little rundown of the things that I had problems with. The first thing I would say is this LED board that they sent you. For some reason I had a couple hard crashes and the LEDs just stopped displaying. I could only get one to display, and I looked at all of the solder joints and I think there are little capacitors on the back and they all look solid. I didn't really see any problem with it. I had no idea why it wasn't working. But then when I found that this mount here for the antenna, where I originally had it mounted, it would just cause this crazy leverage action and it would just like crack it like nuts. So before it actually cracked, I decided to do something about it. I ended up desoldering all of these LEDs, drilling a hole in the center and actually mounting my antenna directly to that. Originally had the alarm here, the buzzer here, and I moved it back here. The antennas, where I can never seem, I don't know how people always get away with those. They probably just don't crash as much as I do. I don't know. But every time, the zip ties would always break on me, the straws would always, so I just ended up just directly mounting them in there. This little crack in the front, I mean, if you do a head-on crash, you're probably going to break something regardless. Another thing that I don't like about this frame is the way they have this mount for the HS1177 camera. It just constantly moves. When you crash, it's going to move a little bit, and I just can't get it tight, those screws tight enough to keep it from going anywhere. I've even tried to use lock washers, and those, or not lock washers, star washers, and those don't even really work very well. I do think that they came up with a better design than this, where there's, I think, 4 mounting points instead of 2. I didn't get that style, so I can't really give a review on that. All in all, I'd say it's a pretty solid frame. Give it a go. Thanks for watching.
And I don't want nobody, and I don't want nobody. You got that right. And I don't want nobody. I lost. Want nobody, and I don't want nobody. Yeah.